Hi, I'm Samantha Anderson, Director of Communications for Newton Public Schools, and I'm here with Superintendent Van Rankin, and we're here to go over some of last night's highlights from the board meeting, as well as just answer any of the questions you may have. We know there's probably a lot of them, so we want to be able to answer those for you. First of all, make sure you leave any questions you may have in the comment section. So let's talk about the board meeting. Could you explain the gating criteria that you have been working on and that you went over with the board last night?
Well, the gating criteria that we went over with the board last night changed a little bit over the course of today. We actually had another meeting scheduled for today, and the committee went through making some adjustments instead of some numerical values. What was really cool about televising board meetings is that we have a lot of people watching them, and shout out to the Newton High School math department. Some individuals were watching that, and during some of their discussions last evening and then during the course of the day, gave us some insight into maybe how to adjust some of those numerical values we were trying to assign to the different colors. And so we're going to make an adjustment in that regard. But the things that we are going to use are not going to change in terms of the suggested criteria that we looked at, which would be student and staff attendance, the absenteeism rate, and what we would do is base the difference there based upon what our average daily attendance was for students last year, and we're developing a report for average daily attendance for staff last year. And then there's some values that we would assign to that that follow pretty much along what the Kansas State Department of Education put in place. For example, if we would be in a green type of a mode if our ADA or our attendance, is equal or 3% above the baseline building level. We'd be in yellow if it's 3 to 5.9, orange 6 to 9.9, and red, which would be greater than 10%. We look at the 2-week county percent positive test rate, and once again, those values, and they don't mean anything when I say them, but I'll say them anyway, less than 5%. So if you have a 5% positive test rate, we would be in green. 5.1 to 9.9 would be yellow. Orange is 10 to 14.9, and anything over 15 would be in the red. And we look at the trend in the county incidence rate, which would be a 2-week comparison. So we would essentially see if we have a stable, an increasing, or a decreasing trend in that rate. And then what I had shown last night at the board meeting was that we would essentially have a numerical average. But we are going to change that. So until that becomes more finalized, I'm not going to put that necessarily out, but just in a conversation with the folks at the math department based upon how those weightings were kind of carried over, we think there's room for improvement there. So our goal is to kind of finalize that over the next day, and then we would get that information out to the community and the parents so they have somewhat of an idea. One thing that I talked about last night is we would look at Wednesday, making the announcement for the following week. In our discussions today, we decided to go ahead and make that instead of a Wednesday. I would do the calculations for that on Monday evening, which would be for the next Monday, so for that next week. So it gives parents approximately 4 days, really, Tuesday through Friday, in terms of work days to make any kind of arrangements that they need to make. We spent quite a bit of time today also discussing what the different levels mean in terms of modes. We got 4 colors in terms of operational mode. Green, which would essentially be everybody's on-site 100% attendance, pre-K through 12. Yellow, we're looking at 2 different modes of operation within the yellow, splitting up the pre-K through 6 and the 7 through 12. We actually have that split also in orange. And the reason that is with our pre-K through 6 kids, we know it's really difficult from a custodial care perspective, number one. And some of the research indicates that maybe those elementary kids are not quite as susceptible. Does not mean our staff and our adults are not susceptible, But we're trying to find that balance to make sure that we can meet the needs of all of our families and also ensure staff safety to the greatest degree possible. We would have what we call a modified on-site for our pre-K through 6, where we're really ensuring that we have cohort groups of 15 or less. Now, in each one of our elementary buildings, that's going to look a little different. If we have 2-section buildings, it's a little easier than if we have 3-section buildings. Within 3-section buildings, there may be, some differences in terms of some cohort groups, but those changes will be kind of minimal. Okay, so we're still trying to keep those kids together, so they wouldn't be like daily changes. They would just be based upon circumstance and how we can spread the staff out. I know that sounds confusing. It makes perfect sense in my head, but the individual buildings will be able to share some of that stuff. If we were in that yellow mode for 7 through 12, they would be in that hybrid environment, which we're talking about attendance on Monday, Tuesday, with one cohort group physically. That the other half of that course would be attending virtually. In a remote mode, pardon me. On Wednesday, we would have a day for remediation, bringing in small groups of kids. Then on Thursday and Friday, in that hybrid environment, the other half of that group would be on site, while the first half that were in physical attendance on Monday and Tuesday would be remote. So I know it sounds a little bit confusing. When we release that chart, it'll make a little bit more sense. If we were to switch to yellow, or probably to orange, in terms of school activities, our pre-K through 6 would follow a hybrid model, which would be similar to the 7-12 in terms of attendance. Cohort groups on Monday and Tuesday attendance, half on-site, half remote, switching that around on Thursday and Friday. Once again, on Wednesday being a day to make sure that we have some tiered intervention capacity built in there, bringing in populations of students that need the time and attention. When we would shift to, in that case, in orange, 7 through 12 would be fully remote. Okay, if we were in red, based upon those 3 gating criteria, everyone would be remote. Everyone would be remote. Now, we're still working through, but have a decent idea on activities. Once again, this has not been approved by the Board of Education, so just kind of give you a little idea of the things that we're working on. If we're in green and yellow, right now we're following CASHA and USD 373 guidelines that have been put together by our district athletic director with advice from coaches, other league schools, and schools across the state. And so what we would be doing in both of those situations is limiting group sizes to the extent possible. When we get to orange, we would have on site, following our guidance, education guidance, but group travel would be limited. No junior varsity or middle school competitions for the high-risk activities. And there's a list of those high-risk activities. I know obviously football is one of them. Wrestling is another one. I'd have to look at that list. I don't have that list memorized. I apologize. We would also limit group sizes to the extent possible. And then if we were remote in that red, we wouldn't be having or hosting activities. So that would make things a little bit, I still want to see how remote activities would work there. I guess there are some that are trying to set up quiz bowls and things like that remotely. So that would be interesting to see a remote quiz bowl competition, how they would be able to structure that. We look at spectators and audiences. There is, if we were to get to, for example, orange, we would look at virtual streaming only for that. So no physical attendance of spectators. If we were in yellow, limiting perhaps to 2 per participants, especially if the venue size is limited. You think about like a volleyball competition, for example, indoors, that might be pretty difficult to be able to do. So in all of the phases, in our operational guidance in terms of visitor access, that's by appointment only and very limited in all of our levels, except for red. In red, there will be no visitors allowed at all. So when we look for our high school dual credit courses, the CTE courses, We're trying to, in all 4 modes, remain on site if at all possible. When we got to red, we would have some more restrictions in terms of social distancing. One of the things to keep in mind with these being the dual credit courses, there are some requirements from those junior colleges that we have to follow in terms of contact time and stuff. So a lot has gone into that, a lot of conversations about that gating criteria. Our goal is to have something officially approved within the next week by the Board of Education, which means we have to call a special board meeting to do so. But we feel pretty good right now about how this is looking. After our meeting today, I just told the group to sleep on it. I'll send out an email tomorrow, get your input, and then we'll proceed from there. I'll work with some health officials to make sure we're on point with that. So a lot of information in a little bit of time there. It's kind of a complicated little process we have to go through because we want to make sure we're making a good decision, a good balanced decision for all involved.
All right, and real quick, the board approved 2 nurses' aides. Will you just let us know what that does for the schools, especially during this school year?
Well, and it's for this school year only. And not only they approved 2 nurses' aides, they also approved us ensuring that we had coverage during the school day in every one of the buildings, from someone that has some sort of health training. And that really, because if the school nurse isn't on site, a lot of times that will fall to an administrative assistant. So that takes that burden off of them. And I really, during this time, want to make sure that we've got some folks with some more specific training. Not that office assistants don't do a good job. I know that they do. Where I've been in my last 2 districts, actually 3, we only have part-time nurses accessible. But I think during this point in time, we really want to have, at a minimum, some sort of a help aide, but hopefully, if possible, nurses. So we're real fortunate in a lot of our buildings. We do have nurses, we just don't have them there all day. So this will allow us to have some sort of a health professional to help with screening and being available for students and staff all day long. So I'm excited about that. I appreciate the board for approving that request.
Okay, and what about the census? Can you just let us know how that might impact our school district?
And this is something that obviously is a constitutional thing. We always need to make sure that we remember this isn't something that the federal government decides to do. It's something they have to do from a constitutional perspective. It's real important that you fill out your census. If you've not done that, you really need to take this opportunity to do so. I believe they actually backed the date off a month, so you don't have as much time as you would have before. But based on population, Kansas receives around $6 billion through different federal programs like Title I, special education, school lunch programs, and every person, every uncounted person costs the state approximately $2,000 in federal funds. So, since that happens every 10 years, it's important that if you've not completed your census form, you can go online and do so. I know that I did that in my previous location, completed that census form. So it's important that you do that. So I urge all USD 373 residents, no matter what your status is, to complete that census form.
Okay, and someone was wondering when they would know which 2 days, if we were in hybrid, so Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday, when they would know which 2 days they would be assigned.
If we're in hybrid, as soon as they get all the schedules done, they're still working on all of the logistics behind that. So you're a week out from knowing, at least a week out, maybe a week and a half, knowing which one that would be. And once again, with all the changes we've made, we're a little bit behind in our student information system. And it's no fault of our technology people, our counselors, our building administrators. This is just where we work, as we're, it took a while to nail down the numbers of remote versus non. And then we want to make sure there's some things in there that we can do to ensure that families, if at all possible, can be on the same days if they're in different schools or even in the same school. So probably I'd say a week and a half at the earliest. But principals are a lot better than I am of giving you that kind of information, I'm sure.
All right. Someone was wondering, they said that they know the high school is starting differently this year, but are there any changes for K through 4 in the middle schools?
Um, well, yeah, the high school's on that 4x4 block schedule. There'll obviously be some changes. I know that they made some slight schedule changes at Santa Fe and at Chisholm, but they're not turning over the apple cart like what was done up at the high school. So yeah, there'll be some minor changes in scheduling here and there, but nothing like what the high school is undergoing. So obviously every year there's always tweaks here and there to make things more efficient in any school schedule, but once again, buildings will communicate that kind of stuff with parents during those family engagement days, if not in advance of that.
Okay, and Ashley asked if they were only going to be able to send kids to school 2 days a week. And just to clarify, that's only if you are in the hybrid for the flexible learning. So that would be kind of depending on the gating criteria you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, that is not a standalone possibility for learning, okay? You have remote or you have flexible. And flexible, we would only be in hybrid, in that hybrid mode based upon the gating criteria, and your student was signed up for that flexible learning mode, which gives you the opportunity, not the opportunity, once again, it's not a choice. The choice is the flexible or the remote only. We're only in flexible if the gating criteria say that we need to be, or pardon me, only in hybrid if the gating criteria say we need to be. And that's just the way we kind of have to work that out from a staffing perspective and logistics.
Okay, and someone asked if there was any news on if kids can do schoolwork while they're at Latchkey, or
yeah, I don't know. I'm assuming that's never been an issue before. I'm assuming part of that time at least is set up, for some academic support.
And I know this was part of our board meeting, but you may not be able to remember off the top of your head. Do you know about how many people chose remote and how many people chose the flexible?
The actual number of people, I couldn't go calculate that, but it was like 22%. Something like 22% of our student body as a district.
And that info is actually on board docs and broken down. So if you want to see school by school, you can do that. Do we have any updates on Chromebook checkout for 9th graders yet?
That'll be something you'll have to check with the high school about. I know that they were talking about that, but I don't memorize any of that information.
I don't know if we've gotten to this, and I think we'll probably follow Keisha's guidance, but how will sports work with parents watching their children? Will there be new rules for that?
Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean by rules. A lot of that stuff is being left up to the individual schools. And so there's Keisha guidance, but once again, that's just guidance. Mr. Becker's worked really hard at the middle level and the high school level with league schools. I know, for example, there's some abbreviated middle school schedules. I'm not sure exactly where he's at in terms of publishing those. When you look at where we're at with respect to that, when that gating criteria does get released, you'll see that, like for example, if we're in the orange, we would not allow spectators or audiences, to view the competitions. Once again, because we're at that place, from a gating criteria perspective. If we were orange, we've got a high absentee rate and also a pretty high, potentially a pretty high positive percent positive case rate. So once again, that stuff will be released. So yes, there will be differences.
All right, we've gotten towards the end of our questions. So if anybody has any more, just leave them in the comments section. This is kind of a big question, but one I've gotten a lot can you just talk a little bit about how involved this planning process has been? It wasn't like we could sit back in March and figure out what we would be doing in September, was it?
No, and it's just like with the gating criteria. That wasn't released until I believe it was a week ago Thursday. And so was it a week ago Thursday? No, folks, the days are running together quite a bit. That was just recently released. It may have been on Tuesday, and we had our superintendent webinar on Thursday. Actually, no, I'm going to back up. It was released to the Kansas State Board of Education on Tuesday. They approved that, okay, but we did not have any kind of instruction as to how to interpret that and how to utilize that guidance until Thursday at the superintendent's meeting. That Thursday afternoon, we actually met as a group because we had planned on working on that criteria. And so we spent literally 4 hours that afternoon working through that. Over the course of the weekend, some work was also done. And then obviously today we met for another couple of hours to kind of wrap some of that up. So one of the things that we've gotten used to doing in terms of all of this planning is having to back up and take in new information to make better decisions, because I don't like to make these decisions in isolation. I want to make sure that I involve people that have expertise in areas that I don't. And that's been the process the whole time, is to try to make sure that we are making a good decision for all of our students and families and staff. So when I look through like the evolution of a lot of our operations stuff, gosh, Sam, you're on that committee. How many times have we met just to answer questions from staff in terms of operations things with respect to checklists, protocols? If this happens, what do we do? So I probably in the last week, just in terms of operations, there's been at least 2 meetings, if not 3, just to discuss and answer those questions to make sure our staff knows what's on tap for what to expect. I know, for example, that last week with our teachers, Jane Nichols, our operations head, and our HR department head, she conducted a training session for all staff one morning that, she had a whole list of things she was going to get through and got through only a portion of that, based upon questions and stuff that were asked. So this stuff is really complicated and complex at the same time. There are a lot of moving parts, and when you think about all of the attendance centers we have, all of the staff that we have to be aware of, all the different types of staff, when you're talking about specials, regular content teachers, paraeducators, custodial, maintenance, all of these folks have to all be brought up to speed, and they have to be involved in the conversations in terms of training. Bus drivers, food service. It's pretty logistically pretty amazing, and they just work so hard to come up with what is going to be a good educational environment for your kids. So, and once again, we're trying to balance the learning needs, with paying attention to what we need to do to be responsive to the pandemic. And it's been quite an undertaking. So, I'd seen on television about a week and a half ago, you guys knew this was coming ever since, school ended last spring, and that's accurate. But in our district, for example, you had a new superintendent that didn't get here until July 1, and I think I've explained that before. I'm not going to beat that horse too much. We didn't get guidance from the Kansas State Department of Education until the middle of July, and all that planning that might have been done or had been done at that time had to make a bunch of switches. If you go to that guidance document on the Kansas State Department of Education website, for example, when you look at the remote learning section in there, when they first put that out in the middle of July, there were 2 pages. Now there's 7 or 8 or 9. So they're also going through iterations to make improvements to ensure that, based upon the new information they have, that we can make better decisions. So this isn't something we develop and we stop. We have to keep taking into account that new information. I'm sure this gating criteria that we're working on right now will probably look a little different in a month based upon the reactions that we need to make with new information that we're getting. So If we don't change, we're not meeting your needs, meeting the needs of our students and our parents. So we want to be flexible enough to where we can, but also, rigid enough to where we're providing what's necessary for all families. So it's been quite a deal. No superintendent in the state has ever thought they'd ever be doing this. Neither did any principal or teacher. So we're all in this same boat together. Somebody this morning in a meeting I was involved with said, everybody's kind of going through some decision fatigue, and I kind of like that term. You're almost to the point sometimes, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. Well, if we'd have done this before, we'd know what to do, but we haven't, so we're having to make it up. So, and we're not just making it up with our own intuition. We want to use some solid practices from people that have expertise that we don't. So it's been quite a ride.
Okay, and someone was curious, so the cases at Bethel, would they be, if we were doing it today, would they be involved in our gating criteria? Because a lot of those people were from out of state, but they can still spread it here, so would they be involved?
Well, it's when you go to the Harvey County COVID-19 dashboard, all right, and they've updated that quite a bit within the last, seriously, couple of hours. They hadn't included the weekend data until today, and they had, and really yesterday's data was not also put in there. That didn't sound right, okay? But if you look at, for example, if you go to the Harvey County dashboard, when they represent 817, which would have been yesterday, they didn't have any values in there until today. Well, they represent 115 new tests with 21 new cases. So my assumption is that they're adding that information now because that is one of the highest test days, well, for sure within the last couple of weeks. They gave 115 tests. On the 5th of August, they gave 173. Those are by far the two highest days of tests that have been administered in, since July the 20th. July the 20th, what they have on their dashboard. So yes, that data will impact us.
All right, and someone was wondering if we knew about what size classes would be if we were in a hybrid situation. Would it just be a little bit less than half, probably?
Well, yeah, our goal, we will keep them under 15. They'll be under 15. That's what we really plan to try to do to the best of our ability. And they will be social distance within the classroom at that point in time in that hybrid. That is our goal. Now, logistically, there's maybe sometimes where that's not always possible every time. We're going to use our instructional aides to provide academic support to spread, especially at that elementary level. So our teachers are going back and forth within that cohort group during the course of that day to provide instruction to one group maybe, if we have larger sections. So that's kind of what we really want to be able to do.
And one parent just wanted some clarification. If a student goes home because of a possible exposure and they're at home but they're not sick, can they do remote work, or do we know how that will work yet?
We're still kind of working on some of that. The thing is, it's like, okay, if the kid was in the flexible learning environment and we were like, for example, hybrid, how does that kid switch automatically into the remote learning environment only during that time and then come back? We still have a couple of little bugs to work out there, and the reason I'm saying that is we have specific teachers that are teaching those hybrid sessions, especially pre-K through 6, and 7 and 8 is a little bit different, and 9 through 12 is also a little bit different than those other two. So that's just one little thing that we need to address. They'll have obviously access to educational materials, but whether it will be in that remote only setting, we've got a couple of other things to hash out there yet. So ask that question in a week, and I bet you we have more information for you.
All right. And what color are we as of now? Like, if we had to choose, I know there's a lot of math to it, so have you done?
Well, actually, there's not as much math as there was yesterday.
Seems like there's a lot.
We're probably yellow, but I just haven't calculated today's numbers because, like I said, they were just updated. If we were to look at yesterday's number, actually Friday's would be a better indication. We would be yellow. which would mean modified on-site pre-K through 6, hybrid 7 through 12.
And a couple kindergarten questions. Do we know if they're starting the same time as everybody else and if they'll be in half day or full day?
Once again, they are starting the same time as everyone else. We have some logistics there to work out if it's half day or full day. So once again, terrible non-answer. I apologize.
And then I think this would be good to clarify. I think there's some confusion. So this parent says the discussion of hotspots has been brought up. What about those that make too much for the Cox Assistance Program, but not enough to afford the increase in price of services to account for multiple kids? We have a plan for hotspots in general, right?
Yes, we do. We purchased 250 hotspots. Those can be checked out. If you have a need for that, I want you to reach out to your administrator in terms of your student needing internet access. We do not want internet access to be a barrier. So reach out to your building administrator. They will point you in the right direction to make sure that we make that happen. That's one thing, folks. I want to know if it's not happening. And this isn't a deal to penalize anyone. I don't want any student or family falling through any cracks as it relates to this stuff. We need those feedback loops. So you have that generic email address. I think, Sam, when they send those in, those go to you. A lot of times you pass those on to me if I don't get them. We need to know if you're having a difficulty in that area. But reach out to your building administrator. That's just not acceptable if you don't have internet access. We're here to help you in that regard.
All right. And do we have a specific plan for recess? I think social distancing will still be in place and they'll be wearing masks from the last I've heard.
Yes.
This is a good clarification to make. Can you tell us the difference between what modified and hybrid is?
Yeah. Okay. When we talk, and this is one of the things that gets a little confusing. If you look at the KSDE criteria, for example, I should pull that out, where it says elementary, when it says level, and it says on-site, and it's got a couple of asterisks, and then hybrid, right? Well, I don't like that because what we're trying to do is have 100% attendance with those kids. And so we're going to call that modified on-site. That's where we may have to use more instructional aids to be able to get those cohort sizes 15 or below. So what we are looking at during that time for those elementary, pre-K through 6 at this point, being 100% attendance. So I hate to call it hybrid because then that gets confused with what the high school, the 7 through 12 hybrid is. So when it's modified on-site, we are looking at pre-K through 6 in that yellow being 100% on-site attendance. We may have to, from a logistics perspective, in some facilities, try to reach out to other facilities in the community to see if we can utilize their facilities to allow that to happen. I think after meeting with the elementary principals this morning, the K4, I feel pretty good that we can probably make that work in their facilities. But 5 and 6, I'm really concerned about in terms of being able to do that over there at Santa Fe. That's kind of a challenge right there.
And then again, someone asked about school start times. That'll be something you'll probably just want to call your building about. Is that right?
Well, in terms of the dates, it's the start date is the September the 3rd. Is that right? I should know that.
Yeah, it's September 3rd.
September the 3rd. Remember, superintendents don't have to go to school on the first day, right? So we might always forget that. But yes, September the 3rd. In terms of like the actual physical starting times in your building for that day, you'll get information from your building.
Okay. And then someone asked if the district would be providing masks for the kids, or do parents need to?
The district will provide masks for all students. All students and staff, we have purchased enough masks. That should, you should have a couple of masks actually accessible. Now, one of the things I will say as it relates to that, parents, and students, we need you to wash your masks because obviously, this goes back to the same thing like washing your clothing. So we like to have, some clean masks for our kids to be able to breathe through. And when they get dirty, they are harder to breathe through, obviously, just like a filter in your air conditioning system.
And we actually have some guidance on how to wash your masks. It's in online in an overview packet, so that we took what the CDC guided us to do. So, someone was asking what's going to happen with sports this year. We don't have a crystal ball, but right now they're in practice. Is that right?
That is correct. And I'll say this, folks, a lot of this stuff all depends upon how well we wear our masks, how well we social distance, practice good hygiene, try to really stave off this, the viral spread. It really does. We want to stave off that community spread. So all of those practices, that way we can have practices for kids in games.
All right. And someone was asking if a cohort is going to be a true cohort in that the special teachers and support staff would be providing remote lessons.
Well, a lot of our specials, we're looking to try to push those into the classroom, not remotely, but in person. So the kids would stay there, the teacher would travel to them, that specials teacher. Now, we have some logistical issues in some situations that are going to make that difficult for some of those specials, but that's our goal right now. And talking with those elementary principals, a lot of that stuff is going to work out. There'll just be some hiccups here and there.
And then one parent kind of expressed some question in why K through 6 would be going, when 7 through 12 is going hybrid, K through 6 is still on site. Can you just explain the reasoning for that and what additional safety measures we'll be taking there?
Well, the reasoning behind that is twofold. The goal is to have 100% attendance if at all possible. That's not one of the reasons. The two reasons essentially go back to, what the research is saying is that the students at that age level are not as susceptible to showing symptoms of the virus. There's the science out there that's still evolving. I think some of that will change over time. And also, we want to consider that custodial care piece too. A lot of our families are still working, and that's a really difficult thing. I know our teachers are not babysitters. That's not their main job, but custodial care is a function of schools and has been for a long time. So we're trying to find that balance with that on-site. So the way that will look different is that we are going to ensure that those cohort groups are no larger than 15 and try to keep them together as best as we possibly can, during the course of the school day. Going back to that piece about students, like I said, that will evolve. I think that information will evolve over time. But right now, the indicators that we have are that those kids are just not as susceptible to either obtaining the virus or spreading that. So I know that there's conflicting information out there about that. But this, once again, is trying to follow along as much as we can with the guidance that Kansas State Department of Education has put out. Also, guidance from local officials as well. So this is a really tough call, parents, and I really want you to understand that. We're trying to find that balance here, and we'll make adjustments as we need to. So it's a tough call.
Okay, and someone wanted to know if kids could carry their own hand sanitizer.
I don't know what kinds of rules there are for or against that. I guess you would have to ask your building principal. I know that I carry my own little hand sanitizer thing on my book bag all the time as well. So I don't know if there are rules that are specifically say that you can't. I'd reach out to the building administrator and get clarification on that. That way you don't get in trouble and you can't say the superintendent told me that I could on a Facebook Live session. How about that? We'll go there.
Okay, and I'm going to give one last call for questions. We've reached the end, but while we're waiting for that, can you just talk a little bit about the family engagement opportunities and what parents can expect there?
Yeah, buildings will be reaching out to you soon about those opportunities. And those are going to take place that last week of August, so August 31st, September 1, and September 2. And the goal of those, the purpose of those, is to bring families in, and hopefully with your child, to actually show you how to navigate through the Canvas learning management system, how to, when we're in a hybrid or remote setting, complete those learning logs, which all have to do, and they have to have parent signatures with those, and just to be able to give you the opportunity to ask questions. What's school going to look like for my kid in this classroom setting? Okay, so that'll look a little different at the secondary level, but pre-K through 4, and that's it's going to be with that homeroom teacher. 5 through 12, they'll be parents will be assigned, or staff will be assigned to parents bringing those in to go through those same types of things with them, and how school will look in that particular setting. So it's really an opportunity to have a parent-teacher conference a little bit before parent-teacher conferences, but it's a different type of a thing in that we really want you to feel comfortable going home and providing that academic support if we're in hybrid or remote that you need to be able to do for your children. So I really want all parents to take advantage of that opportunity when you're scheduled to come in, or if you're able to schedule a time, however that building is able to work that out, that you go in and you ask as many questions as you can to feel comfortable with your child when you're having to help support them, if that is necessary, becomes necessary. And let's face it, folks, there's a really good chance that probably will happen sometime during the course of this semester. Once again, if we social distance, we wear our masks, we practice good hygiene, we might be able to, at least maybe stay more in the yellow than bumping up into orange, and hopefully not red at all. If we're red, there's a lot of other bad things probably happening too. So please take advantage of that family engagement opportunity. It's not just a parent-teacher conference. It's really a time to learn about what needs to happen for your kid to be successful academically. We don't want kids falling behind academically, and this is a fear that I have about all of this, just like last spring, because we're going to expect a lot more from your kids this year than was expected last spring, and you need to know how to be able to help support that. You also need to know who to ask questions of, too, in case you do have them. If you're like me, I'll go to one of those things and I'll think, yeah, I know that, yeah, I remember, and I don't go, oh man, what did they say when I need to be able to do that? So, that's a time to really ask, who do I ask if I'm struggling too? So.
All right, one quick question. Someone has 2 high schoolers and an elementary student. Is it guaranteed that one of the high schoolers will be able to stay home the same days as the elementary student in hybrid?
Okay, in terms of it's a guaranteed, honestly, when I think about how things work from a scheduling perspective, there's no guarantee, okay? Now, if that doesn't happen, what I would do is I would reach out to the high school or the elementary school and see what can be worked out, all right? When you figure there's 3,400 kids, approximately 3,400 kids in the district, there will be mistakes made. None of them will ever be intentional. Honestly, when we're setting this up, the way we're trying to set this up, there's a feature within our student information system that allows us to schedule families kind of on those same days, okay? Even if we do that, like at that secondary level, there's sometimes where that's not possible based upon the class the kid needs. So there will be mistakes. Reach out if you have an issue. Ask questions. We'll get you pointed in the right direction to where your problems can become resolved, or you understand why things landed the way they landed. So you just need to ask. Don't just sit there and say, oh, this is the end. No. Be an advocate. Go after it. Get after it.
And this is a good question that was talked about last night. Why was 5-6 grouped with K4 rather than 7-8, especially with the specialized teachers? They thought they were more similar to 7-8.
Yeah, and this goes back to, I think, of a 10-year-old being at home alone. You know, honestly, it really, really does. And it goes back to that custodial care piece. You know, that's one of the major reasons, in all honesty, is that I know in some settings, for example, families, the parents still have to work, and I know I was left at home. I made this joke the other day, or maybe today. I was left at home, you know, as if they're looking at me. It didn't turn out so well, right? So, you know, I make light of that a little bit, but I just worry about those 10-year-olds being home alone.
All right, well, we've reached the end of our questions. If anybody has any more questions, just email info@usd373.org or shoot us a message on Facebook. Thank you so much for being here, Mr. Van Rankin, and thank you everybody who watched.
Have a great day, folks.